Good morning, all. Now we are going to discuss about ER modeling, which means entity relationship modeling. So first, what is ER model? So the ER model is a conceptual model for designing a database, and it also represents the logical structure of a database. It contains some entities, attributes, and their relationship between them. So an ER diagram shows the relationship among entity sets. For example, student, course, staff, or college. The logical structure of a database means what are all the data which resides into the database systems. That's what called the logical structure. So ER, which means entity relationship model, it's a conceptual model for designing a database. So what are all the components of ER model? So ER model contains entity, relationship, and then attribute. So further, entity can be categorized into two types. One is strong entity, another one is weak entity. And attribute can be classified into key attribute, composite attribute, multi-valued attribute, and then derived attribute. Relationship can be categorized into one to one, one to many, many to one, and then many to many. First one. So these are all some terms which are used in ER model. First one, rectangle, which represents the entity sets. Ellipse represents the attributes. Diamonds, which represents the relationship set. Lines, it is used to link the attributes to one entity set and entity sets to relationship set. Double ellipses called multi-valued attributes. Dashed ellipses is called derived attributes. Double rectangle are called weak entity set, and double lines are called total participation of a entity in a relationship set. So these are all the symbols and representation of that particular symbol. Rectangle means it is an entity. Ellipse, which denotes the attribute. Diamond shape are called relationship. Line, which is used to link the entity and their attributes and then relationship. Double ellipse are called multi-value, and double rectangle are called as weak entity. First, definition of entity. An entity represents a real world object, or we can say like it's a thing or object that is distinguishable from all other objects. It acts as a building block of a database. For example, every object is considered as an entity. For example, person, card, employee, board, all the things can be considered as an entity. So for example, course, event, reservation, these are all the applications we have used for this entity. And things, we can use some product or document or device, anything. What is entity set? An entity set is a set of entities of the same type that can be shared from the same properties or attributes. For example, the entity student, which represents the individual students like Alice, Bob, etc. That student entity set includes all the student entities in the database. So each row in that table represents one entity. So here student, which contains some entity type, E1, E2, E3, which can be wholesomely, we can call it as entity set. Strong entity and then weak entity set. So entity can be categorized into two types. One is strong entity, another one is weak entity. So what is strong entity? It is an entity that has a primary key, which means a unique identifier is called as primary key. And it can exist independently in a database, and it does not depends upon anything, any other entity, which can be represented by a rectangle in a ER diagram. Its primary key is underlined. For example, student is a table. Here student ID, name and age will be the attribute. Here student ID will be act as a primary key because unique representation of every student. So that's what we are saying, a student ID is a primary key. So that student is a strong entity and student ID is the primary key. It does not depend upon the anything. Weak entity, which means it cannot be uniquely identified by its own attributes alone, which depends upon the any other strong entity for its identification and does not have any other primary key, and it uses some partial key and then foreign key from the related strong entity. so that it can be represented by double rectangle in a ER diagram. So double rectangle shows the weak entity. For example, so consider an order and order item scenario here. So here order is a strong entity because order ID is the primary key. Order item is a weak entity because it cannot exist without an order and it needs order ID to be uniquely identified. So partial key means item number within the particular order will be false. So full key can be say like order ID plus item number. So this is called as a weak entity and then strong entity. Example. So here a company may store some information of the dependents, for example, parents, children, and spouse of an employee. The dependents can't exist without the employee. So dependent will be a weak entity type and employee will be the identifying entity type for dependent, which means it's a strong entity type. So we can say like double rectangle or called weak entity set. So that's all about the introduction about in ER model, like entities and then types of entities. We'll see the what are all the attributes, types of attributes and relationship in next class. Thank you all. So good morning everyone. In previous class we have discussed about what is ER model and what are all entity and their types. So now let us discuss about the attribute. So first, what is attribute? An attribute describes the properties or characteristics of a particular entity. An attribute can be represented as oval in an ER diagram. We can say like ellipse, which represents the attributes. There are the four main types of attributes, which is key attribute. We can say like primary key attribute, composite attribute, multi-valued attribute, and the derived attribute. For example, a student entity contains roll number, name, date of birth, age, address, and then mobile number or the attributes, which can define the entity type of the particular student. So first one, key attribute. So key attribute can be uniquely identify an entity from an entity set. For example, student roll number can be uniquely identify a particular student from a set of students, right? So roll number is a key attribute. So which can be represented by a oval and the text of the key attribute is underlined. So we have to note that we have to underline that roll number. This is what called as primary key or key attribute in a entity. Second type is composite attribute, which means an attribute combination of other attributes, which is called as composite attribute. So in entity, the student address is a composite attribute as an address is composed of other attributes. For example, pin code, state, country. These are all the combination of the other attributes. So this is called as composite attribute. Multi-valued attribute, which is an attribute that can hold multiple values. That is what called as multi-valued attribute. It can be represented as double ellipse or double ovals in an ER diagram. For example, a person can have more than one phone numbers. A person can have more than one mail ID. So we can represent it as double ellipse. Example. So here student is an entity, roll number, name, date of birth, and phone number. So here roll number can uniquely identify the particular student in a set of students. So we have to underline this roll number. So this is called key attribute. Phone number. So particular student can contains n number of phone numbers. So we can note that double ellipse. Derived attribute. A derived attribute is one whose value is dynamic and derived from another attribute, which can be represented by a dashed oval or dotted ellipse. For example, person age can be derived from date of birth. So we can say like age is a derived attribute of the student. So this is an example. So here person is an entity and name, address, SSN, birth date, age, hobbies are all the attributes. So here SSN will be the primary key or key attribute. Age will be the derived attribute and hobbies will be the composite attributes because a person can contain a number of hobbies. So another example, so student is an entity and which contains n number of attributes. This is what called as types of attributes in EAN model. We'll discuss about what is relationship and what is relationship set and types of relationship in upcoming classes. Thank you all.